All right, so John, it's almost 2 years ago to the day that we sat in a Vegas hotel room and started this process. And so we're back here in a Vegas hotel room 2 years later, hopefully 2 years wiser, and we have this book called Change of Seasons that's been created. How do you feel, going back 2 years to what you wanted this to be? Okay, when we first spoke, you had a couple of definite things in mind. Tell me your thoughts about, did we get there? Do you feel satisfied? Did it morph along the way? What do you think of the finished product versus how you went into this 2 years ago?
Well, having never written a book before, I didn't realize the amount of work was going to be involved and how exciting and daunting, and also how much it would dig up and resurrect a lot of memories that, interestingly enough, I may never have thought of for the rest of my life. So the process of this writing and working with you and writing the book has really basically, in a way, it's been a gift in that I now have memories that I have re-remembered, which I may never have remembered for the rest of my life. And a lot of details about those memories, because you're such a good researcher and because we've gone into depth on a lot of these things. So that's a very interesting thing, which I think I'll carry that with me for the rest of my life. I don't think I'll forget those things again. At least I don't have enough time to forget them, less time to forget them. But that was one of the things. The other thing stands out in my mind is that I think that I had an idea of how I wanted to pave the way and kind of set the tone for who I am as a musician and as a person. And that was an initial goal of mine in the beginning of the process. And I think we achieved that for sure. I think that was very successful. What I'm a little bit, a little bit more disappointed in that I didn't realize how much ground we needed to cover before I got to some more recent experiences and recent history that I feel very strongly about. Like, for instance, my move to Nashville, the new friends, my entire solo career, which is very important to me and much more vital to me at this moment in my life than the past was. So that, in a way, is a little bit of was something that I had to understand from a practical point of view and a commercial point of view. The book could only be so long. And I think when we got to 400 pages and we were in the late 90s, I realized that even my mother does not want to read any more about me than that.
Well, so the listener knows, too, our intent was to take it up pretty much to modern day.
Right.
But you had these moments, these sort of wake up in the middle of the night moments where you called me and said, hey, you know what, I need to rethink this. And I think that actually helped the book. I think the fact that you were honest enough to not try and just squeeze it in and realize, hey, you've written a book, you know how to write a book now. That's easily another book.
I believe it is another book, and I'm very excited about perhaps, taking that project on and taking it further, especially since it's more recent memories. I will have a clearer vision of that because it's really, not only has it more happened more recently, but it's actually ongoing. So that would be obviously I think at a certain point it's just like making a record. You write 15, 16 songs, 20 songs for a record. Maybe the record can only have 11 songs. I think at some point you have to self-edit. You have to be realistic about what it is. And I want the book to be an experience where people enjoy it and not get bogged down too much to the point where they're not really enjoying the story. And I think what we did was we came up with a story that has a definitive ending. It has an ending that leaves it open for the possibility of a future book and a more recent exploration of who I am and who I've become as a musician and as a person. And that's really, so that's kind of exciting in a way.
Oh, I think it screams for a sequel. I think Where We Leave It definitely screams for a sequel.
I hope so.
You mentioned about memories being fresh and why that would be easier today. I had the benefit of going through your journals from the 1970s, which allowed those memories to be fresh for me today. What struck me about those pages, and there are thousands of them, stacks and stacks of these journals that you meticulously wrote through the 70s, was the amount of things you squeezed into days back there. Did you ever look back and think how it was possible to do all that you did? Because it's dizzying to read what you would squeeze out of 24 hours. And a little
Chris, nothing's really changed when it comes to that.
I know you're still busy. I mean, I know I've watched your schedule. I know how you juggle and get these things done. But in the 70s, it was almost comical between the touring. I mean, touring that isn't like today touring. Touring where you're driving around, you guys in the GTO, you guys
driving
in
around
the
in
van.
cars, vans, buses, whatever.
Really hand to mouth. But you're still accomplishing all kinds of other things.
Yeah, I know. I wonder how I did it myself. I guess it's my nature. I just like to try to squeeze the life out of every moment. It's important to me.
I think that actually what you just said is a theme that comes out of the book that we didn't even plan on.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just by virtue of who you are. Again, it's a very dizzying yet impressive thing to come away with, this idea of always going out and trying to master. You're not going to take on something. There's a part in the diary where you want to get into making films.
Right. And
you get a camera and you go into the editing process. And in the early 70s, you are immersing yourself in like home movie making. You took it very seriously, as you did race car driving, as you did flying, skiing, all these different things, all very physically demanding, mentally demanding, but you throw yourself into them 100%.
Yeah, well, because I enjoy the process. I like learning. I think it's really about learning the process of acquiring those skills and trying to master those skills to the best of my ability, whether they're mental, intellectual skills, or they're physical skills, or a combination of the two. So that's to me, I don't know. I guess that's just I want to keep moving forward one way or the other. It's just a part of my DNA, I guess.
One of the things I think that's really special in the book is there are certain things that you unpack, I think, with a level of detail you've never done before. One of them is Abandoned Luncheonette.
Right.
I mean, what you put into that, you deconstruct that record, song by song, player by player, note by note in some cases. What was it like for you to go back and relive that record? I know how fond you are, but I know you consider that a really defining moment as an album. What was it like to go back and really unpack that as intensely as you did?
It was exciting. It was really exciting because, you're right in saying that I do consider that to be a defining moment. I think it's the moment that put Daryl and I on the musical map in people's minds, even though it wasn't representative of our biggest commercial success. The very fact that neither Daryl and I really cared that much about our commercial success, and we cared more about the music we made and how successful we were at translating our musical ideas into the production of a record, was really that's what really defines what Hall & Oates is about, and it defines what my criteria for success is about. So that record embodies all of that, and it was really interesting to go back, and that was one of the easiest things to do, because because that experience was so vibrant and so alive that's one of the memories that I never did forget. That is a memory that was actually pretty easy to reconstruct, and the fact that I could go into detail was because of the fact that it remains a very important moment in my life.
And also, we even went and even examined that great iconic album cover and sort of broke that story down. That's where your diary really came in handy, because there's that afternoon where you guys get in the GTO, Daryl and Barbara, your friend, the photographer, and you head down outside of Philly and locate the old abandoned diner, trespass, go inside, break in, and she gets these amazing photos in there. But I think and the fact that you went back there years later to that site to sort of reconnect, I think that album, top to bottom, the way it looked, the way it felt, I think our book, brings it out as a complete package in a very unique way.
Well, to me, the way I judge successful music and a successful recording is that everything is of one spirit, mindset, and execution. So, if you want to take it, if you want to talk about a songwriting, it's the perfect marriage of the lyric to the music. The music needs to sound like what the lyrics are talking about. The lyrics need to enhance they need to deliver the message, and the music needs to support that. When that's right and that comes together, then you take it to another level. How do you take that song now that has become something unique and precious, and then how do you record it so that you take it to another level, and the spirit of the recording now enhances the lyric and the music, which have come together so well. Now, how do you make that come alive. And here again, this is what Abandoned Luncheonette was all about. Then you take it to another level. That album cover somehow captured the zeitgeist and the emotion and the what that music was about. So it really, here again, the entire package, from the artwork to the songwriting to the production to the players to the execution, everything about that record was of a piece, of a whole. And that's what it's all about.
I think what's unique too, what I learned about it interviewing Barbara for the book, was that she was a fine artist, and she applied. She didn't just go out and knock out an album cover. She looked at that as a fine art project.
Right.
She shot it in black and white. She hand tinted it with this elaborate 4-step process and all this screening that wouldn't happen today. But even back then, it was a big deal for an album cover.
Yeah. And
I think when you look at the cover today, it feels different than just an album cover. I mean, it feels like a fine artist actually crafted it,
right,
which seems to mirror the depth of the music and the timing to the music.
Yeah, and you're right. You're 100% right. But also, I think in a lot of ways, album covers in general were approached at that during that time. Album covers were a fine art piece.
Yeah.
If you look at the stuff that came out of England by the Hypnosis Company, those album covers were created and conceived with an artist's eye, and that was part of that great era of
for
music.
sure. Henry Diltz was doing it over here.
Yep.
With his kind of
so many things like that.
So
we were in step with what was happening, and luckily for us, that album cover just really did capture the mood of the music that was inside it.
Without giving too much away, if people haven't heard the book yet, John, you also confront some things that happened early in your career in terms of getting out of a certain contract and the tension that took. And there's a great scene in an office that plays out like something out of Goodfellas or something.
Right.
And then later in your career, obviously, there are some things that happen that you address. You're very blunt about, and I think it's going to be the first time a lot of people have heard it. What were the challenges of addressing moments that were more difficult like that where you had to come to grips with things in your life that weren't that easy to unknot?
Well, I think when you're faced with adversity and challenges, and when you're young and you have the realization that maybe the people who you trust and the people who you thought were looking out for you maybe had different motivations or weren't quite as straightforward as you thought they might be. I think when you're young, your first reaction is anger. It's anger and it's frustration and it's can even be hatred, really, for that matter. And you want to lash out, as so many young people do, and without a lot of the perspective of time and other experiences. Now that I revisit those times and those situations that were traumatic, but I revisit them as an older, hopefully wiser, more mature person, I see that they were caused as much by my own negligence and my own ignorance and my own not paying attention to detail. They were precipitated just as much from that than they were from what I was always considering the evil outside entities that made that caused that situation to happen. So I see it now from I guess a more mature point of view, a more holistic point of view, and I realized that in a way I let these things happen to me because I wasn't attentive enough and I wasn't educated enough, and I didn't really spend the time to delve enough into these situations when they were happening. So then once they were, now that they're they're very far in the past, I'm able to look at it from a completely different point of view.
And the irony, of course, is those painful moments really add to the book. I mean, they make the book, they give it color and gravity.
They're important moments, and they were very traumatic when I was living them at the moment. And now I can look at them, and I think I can put them in better perspective. But they're definitely things that I think the average person might not understand. Listen, the music business, just like many parts of the entertainment business, are full of very questionable and somewhat, less than... what's the word I'm looking for? Reputable characters. And there's, when artists and creative people are involved, artists and creative people will always opt for freedom at any cost. And when you opt for freedom at any cost, there's always someone who can take advantage of a kind of a naive artistic mindset and mentality, and that's what's always happened. It's not just us.
I would say lastly, John, I mean, so people know you took this project really seriously. I mean, you were a very diligent writer. You challenged things. We had plenty of back and forths. You analyzed it. You lived with it. You rewrote like a demon. I mean, you were constantly refining and trying to get it to where you were happy with it. How do you think that, if it has this process at all, as an author now, as a writer, has it affected how you might envision yourself creating music? Or is it the same process? Is it just what you do, or do you think this kind of writing will somehow color what you write musically?
Well, I think that no. I mean, I think in a way it was very similar. It was just a different discipline. I always have been a rewriter when it comes to music. Every once in a while, I get the muse comes down and you get this divine inspiration and this magical experience happens with a song that it just seems to form itself, and it's fully formed almost instantly, and maybe there's a few little minor tweaks, but that's rare, and that's that one of those blessed moments that you just can't count on, but sometimes it happens. With a book, I think it was much more of a disciplined process that I had to, and I had to learn. I had to find my voice as a writer. I think I had an idea, and I wrote in a way, and I think I realized that I needed to not to embellish so much, but to really color and make these moments and these past memories come alive. And I needed to do that with my writing. And sometimes, I mean, maybe to a fault, maybe I overwrote in a few instances, and made things more, complex and more, perhaps detailed than they even needed to be. But I think, just like when you're writing songs in the beginning, you become better as a songwriter the more you practice, like exercising a muscle. And I think that's what happened in the course of the book. I think the writing got better, and I think my compulsion to rewrite was only because as I went back and read some of the earlier pieces.
Well, I think that was the great writer's instinct, was realizing once your voice really formed, was to go back and, for consistency's sake, make sure it matched. And I think that was, again, that's what good writers do, and you certainly... I don't know whether it was your journalism major back at
no, it's
school,
just I wanted it to be as good as it could be. And also, I mean, actually, Chris, if you gave me that book right now, I'd still be rewriting.
I know.
So at a certain point, you have to stop, and that's another thing I learned. And like we talked about earlier in the interview, at a certain point, you just have to stop. You have to let it go. And it is what it is, and maybe you could always second guess yourself and say, oh, it could always be better. It could always be better, but maybe not. So.
Well, we'll see what happens in 2 years from now if we're sitting in another Vegas hotel room talking about your next book.
Talking about the next book. If that happens, if people like this book enough, and there's and the world wants to read another 300 pages about me, then I'll be happy to write it.
Thank you, John. You did a great job, man.
All right, thank you, Chris.